year was 1964.
Daytona roared like thunder as Chrysler's 426 Hemi stormed onto the track and crushed everything in its path. Cars didn't just win, they obliterated the field. NASCAR crowds watched in awe as the Hemi rewrote what it meant to dominate an oval. But while Dodge and Plymouth bathed in glory, something strange stirred inside Ford's engineering halls. Whispers echoed of an engine so advanced it bordered on mechanical rebellion. It was codenamed 427 SOHC. Others just called it the Cammer. And what followed was no ordinary rivalry. It was a mechanical standoff fueled by pride, banned before it could truly run. This wasn't just a test of torque and steel. It was a blood feud masked as engineering. At stake was far more than a few trophies. It was about brand supremacy, political leverage, and rewriting the laws of American racing history. Ford's Total Performance program was desperate to counter Mopar's muscle after watching Hemi-powered rockets like Richard Petty's car lap the field with ruthless ease. Meanwhile, Chrysler's engineers, like Tom Hoover, were perfecting a street-to-strip formula that would influence engine design for decades. But before the Cammer could line up on the same tracks, it was banned. NASCAR cried foul, arguing it was too exotic, too expensive, too unfair. Ford pulled the engine, but didn't shelve it. Instead, they sent it to a new battleground, one where rules were loose and glory was raw, the drag strip, a place where the only measurement that mattered was the quarter-mile time. And this is where our story truly ignites. The 427 SOHC Cammer and the 426 Hemi weren't just rare racing engines. They became icons of different philosophies. One, a high-revving, overhead cam marvel. The other, a hemispherical brute with torque you could feel in your bones. Forgotten car engines, maybe, but never ignored. Because when legends clash, the world doesn't forget. It listens, watches, waits to see who really wins. And now, 60 years later, we're still asking the same question. Who was faster? Who was better? And why does it still matter? Let's get into the guts of the machines. Because under the hood, this wasn't just a battle of horsepower. It was about how you build speed from the ground up. If the Hemi was a sledgehammer, the Cammer was a scalpel. Both legendary in their own right, but made for entirely different missions. Ford's 427 SOHC Cammer was a product of urgency and obsession. Engineers took the proven 427 FE block and reimagined it with overhead cams, chain-driven timing, and hemispherical chambers of its own. It was their answer to the 426 Hemi's dominance, and it didn't whisper. It screamed. Up to 657 horsepower in race trim, revving past 7,000 RPM without flinching. It wasn't just fast, it was surgical, made for precision attacks on drag strips and road courses where agility mattered more than brute force. Meanwhile, Chrysler's 426 Hemi was born for war. Built on the battlefield of NASCAR, it featured that iconic hemispherical combustion chamber that allowed better airflow and more efficient burning of fuel. It created monstrous low-end torque that pinned drivers back in their seats. With a conservative rating of 425 horsepower in street trim, it often pushed far beyond in race configuration. The pushrod design might have looked old school, but it proved rugged, simple, and brutally effective under the most punishing conditions. Now, picture the airflow. The Cammer breathed like an Olympic sprinter, its valve train a masterpiece of high RPM design. Twin overhead cams per bank, each controlling valves with surgical timing. Its chain drive was over 6 feet long, yet it held together thanks to tensioners and engineering that bordered on aerospace grade. It allowed for long intake durations and wide valve separation angles, ideal for road racing and rapid throttle response. The Hemi, in contrast, focused on combustion power. That dome-shaped chamber reduced heat loss and maximized explosion energy. It wasn't built to rev high, but to slam torques down early and keep it there. This gave it an edge on tracks where quick acceleration and sustained power output were king. Tom Hoover once said the Hemi wasn't just another engine, it was a revolution. And he was right. Yet across the aisle, Ford's total performance program aimed to outthink Chrysler. Their answer was pure precision wrapped in raw intent. One engine was built to endure. The other was built to explode onto the scene and leave nothing behind. Two engineering philosophies. One high-revving sniper, one low-end warhammer. Both pushing vintage engine showdown boundaries further than Detroit had dared before. And the next step was testing them in the wild. On the drag strip, on the oval, on roads not meant for mercy. Out in the open, away from dyno charts and blueprints, these engines found their true stage. On the drag strip, the Cammer proved its point. Dropped into lightweight Mustangs and Fairlanes, it stunned with quarter-mile times that hovered in the low 10-second range. Some custom builds went even quicker. It wasn't just the horsepower, though that reached into the 600s. It was how fast it got there. High-revving, razor-sharp throttle response, the kind of control that made a skilled driver feel like a sniper behind the wheel. The Cammer wasn't about raw chaos, it was about timing, finesse, and that final few hundredths of a second where races are truly won. Meanwhile, the 426 Hemi found its throne in NASCAR. Before it got banned, it tore through the competition. Richard Petty's legendary run at the 1964 Daytona 500 wasn't a win. It was a statement. Over 200 laps led, lapped the field, multiple times. Nothing else even came close. That torque-heavy, iron-lunged brute ran all day, stayed cool, and delivered lap after lap of domination. It didn't need to scream to be heard. It just crushed everything in its path. But even beyond the pros, these engines made their mark in the shadows. Independent racers, weekend warriors, and backyard mechanics slipped Cammers and Hemis into whatever chassis they could find. Word of mouth spread fast. Stories of a '67 Galaxy with a Cammer running sub-11 seconds on bias ply tires. Or a Dart with a detuned Hemi still embarrassing Corvettes. These weren't myths. They were garage-born legends powered by rare muscle cars and a refusal to back down. SCCA events saw the Cammer shine too. On winding road courses, that high-rev precision let it breathe where others choked. Against big blocks that struggled with weight and balance, the Cammer gave Ford racers a real shot at something Mopar couldn't match: corner speed, real tests, real roads, real results. And every race added another layer to this growing rivalry. Not just numbers on a sheet, but tire smoke and oil stains, and that undeniable grin when your machine crosses the line first. That's where the real speed difference started to show itself. Not just in theory, but in battle. Speed doesn't always win. Not when politics start shifting the gears. Just as the Cammer was set to make its grand entrance into NASCAR, the rules changed overnight. NASCAR officials cited cost, unfair advantage, and lack of availability. The Cammer never got its full moment on the oval. That left Ford stunned. Their masterpiece was benched. So they turned to NHRA and the streets, pushing Cammer builds into drag racing, where the only thing that mattered was raw time. Then came a twist. Chrysler's 426 Hemi, despite being legal and dominant in NASCAR, didn't escape scrutiny either. In 1965, it too was banned. Temporarily, NASCAR insisted on production numbers. Chrysler answered with the street Hemi in cars like the GTX, the Roadrunner, the Charger. Suddenly, the Hemi was no longer just a track weapon. It was available to anyone with the money and the guts. This was the birth of the street-legal monster era. Plymouth slapped Hemis into affordable muscle cars. Dodge advertised brute horsepower. Race on Sunday, sell on Monday became more than a slogan. It was a business model. Meanwhile, Ford had to rework its strategy. The Cammer, complex and expensive, never made it to mass production. It was too rare, too wild, too ahead of its time. A masterpiece with nowhere to go. Inside Detroit boardrooms, tensions rose. Marketing departments wanted road cars. Engineers wanted race wins. Legal teams feared lawsuits. Magazines like Car Life and Motor Trend debated fairness. Was the Hemi truly mass-produced? Was the Cammer too elite for its own good? Articles from that time questioned the meaning of racing homologation, of who should be allowed on the track and who made the rules. By the end of the 60s, the golden age of open-engine innovation had changed. Regulation tightened. The Wild West of engine design began to fade. But not before the Cammer and the Hemi had made their mark. Loud, fast, and unforgettable. Today, you don't just talk about the 427 SOHC or the 426 Hemi. You whisper them with respect. These aren't just old blocks of cast iron. They're sacred relics. To own one is to hold a piece of a time when car companies raced like their lives depended on it. Because in a way, they did. The Cammer became the unicorn. So few were made, and even fewer survived. Drag racers hoarded them. Collectors hunt them. When one shows up at auction, say at Barrett-Jackson or Mecum, people stop what they're doing. A complete Cammer setup can fetch over 6 figures. Not because of its numbers, but because of its myth. It's the engine that never got its fair shot. The outlaw that never got to duel at dawn. The Hemi, meanwhile, became immortal. Chrysler revived the name in the early 2000s. It's on trucks, muscle cars, commercials, t-shirts. You don't have to know engines to know the word Hemi. It became bigger than racing. It became identity. And it all started with that 1964 iron block that flipped the NASCAR world upside down. Pop culture didn't miss the moment either. You'll find both engines in video games, in die-cast models, in films like the Fast and Furious series. The Cammer still shows up in custom hot rods and resto mods that combine vintage blocks with modern tuning. The Hemi is still beating inside modern Hellcats and Challengers, its DNA untouched by time. And on the performance side, both left fingerprints. Ford's 5.2-liter Predator V8 in the GT500? You can trace its RPM-hungry soul back to the Cammer. Chrysler's Hellcat and Red Eye programs? Pure Hemi lineage. Legacy isn't just about numbers. It's about the stories, the noise, the emotion that hits when you hear that crank, that lobe, that explosion of combustion. These engines didn't just change the rules. They made new ones. It's tempting to pick a side, to count the wins, to declare the Cammer faster in the quarter mile, or say the Hemi ruled the ovals. But the truth runs deeper than ET slips or dyno pulls. The Cammer was a machine of surgical brilliance. It could rev to the moon, handled tight corners with poise, and gave Ford its best shot at recapturing the speed crown. It just never got the stage it deserved. The Hemi? It got everything. The track time, the fans, the championships. It rewrote NASCAR history and then came back to dominate the street. It was unstoppable when allowed to run free. But here's the real twist. Maybe speed isn't just about who crossed the line first. Maybe it's about who made the world stop and stare, who changed the direction of the industry, who left scars on the pavement and memories in the minds of racers forever. Because if we're honest, we're still arguing about it today, still comparing RPMs, torque curves, collector values, still dreaming about building a streetcar with a Cammer under the hood. Crowd gather. So who won? Maybe both, or maybe neither. Maybe the real winner is the story itself. The rivalry that never died. The machines that pushed past limits until the rulebooks caught up. And maybe the only thing that matters is this. In the war of speed, the real winner is the legend we still chase.